Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And today I want to turn to my Luis Bunuel series, where I'm making a video on each one of Bunuel's films, at least the ones that are accessible, and not all of them are, unfortunately. Um, Today's film is coming from 1950. This is Los Olvidados, and it is considered to be one of Bunuel's greatest films. Now, I talked about Bunuel's background as far as how he comes to Mexican cinema. I'll just give a brief recap in this video in that he made in France in 1930, he made a film called Lodge Door, which is seen today as one of the great manifestations of surrealist art. It was a feature film. It was much, it was both hated and loved, but through the years it has become, is seen as a great classic surrealist cinema. That was 1930. The year before, he had made a short with Salvador Dali. He makes which was pure surrealism. I just watched it last week. It's really something. And then he also made a documentary a couple of years after Lodge Door, Las Verdes, also known as Land Without Bread, which too has many elements of surrealism. Then he sort of disappears from the international scene. For almost 20 years, and whatever happened to Luis Bunuel? And he attempts to start a film studio in Madrid, but the Spanish Civil War breaks out. He doesn't get any traction in France. He desires to be a filmmaker. He's decided that's what I want to do. He does eventually come to New York, works for the Museum of Modern Art for a couple of years, and then eventually to Hollywood, where he works for about 3 or 4 years. He had also been in Hollywood in the early 1930s and was much impressed by the Hollywood studio system and how they made films. But he couldn't interest anybody in Hollywood for in a film project or hiring him as a director. He did work on some screenplays, dubbing. So he tries his hand in 1947 or 48 in Mexico. He makes a film called Grand Casino, pure commercialism. Bunuel doesn't disown. He says it's not worth seeing. His next film was The Great Madcap, which turned out to be a big hit. And it was a comedy, Bunuelian kind of surrealist, almost screwball comedy. Did great business in Mexico and Spain, Portugal, South America. Attracted the attention of a Mexican producer, Oscar Danziger, who becomes a vital player in the Mexican career of Bunuel. And he wants him to make some more commercial films, but he said, I'll let you make one film that you want to make yourself. And I won't interfere. He does interfere a little bit, but for the most part, Los Olvidados is a personal film by Luis Bunuel that he made in his Mexican commercial cinema career. And he spent 6 months developing this story, visiting the slums of Mexico City, the reformatories, the detention centers. Did a lot of research. The storylines, as bleak, tragic as they are based on real life stories that Bunuel discovered during this process. The sad part of Los Olvidados, as with some of the other Mexican films, is they're so hard to see. And there's, I think, an ancient DVD that might still be available in used condition somewhere. It's not streaming anywhere except on YouTube. Now, there is a terrific restoration with no English subtitles. I tried the auto-translate. They weren't working too well. There is another print of Los Olvidados, not nearly as good, but still watchable, that does have good English subtitles. And I will link in the description box below to both of these two films. But it's really sad that one of the great films of one of the great directors we have such limited access to, with the tens of thousands of movies streaming in good condition on different streaming services. So as I say, the storyline here is about poverty. It's about kids. Two main characters, Jabo. He's been in a reformatory. He's escaped. The police are looking for him. He's an older kid, and he goes back to the slums and tries to disappear there in the slums, but he does attract some much younger kids, including to become part of his gang for petty theft. And one of these kids is Pedro. He's maybe 12 or 13 years old, and he's out in the streets. His mother is fed up with him. He doesn't bring in any money. She has younger children. She doesn't want to even feed Pedro. She doesn't even want to provide him a place to sleep. And Pedro really desires the love of his mother. And he tries to go good, but with his relationship with Jabo, who is super violent. He's really an evil character, whereas Pedro is a good kid at heart. He wants to be a good kid. He wants to help his mother out. He wants his mother's love. There's a great surrealistic dream where Pedro is involving his mother, and with Jabo, who does come into play in between Pedro and his mother's relationship. But this is really it's a bleak, grim, pessimistic film. Cinematically, it's simply wonderful in the way that Bunuel directs this. He had Gabriel Figueroa to do the cinematography here. Figueroa is a legendary Mexican cinematographer who worked on a couple of John Ford films. He was known for the great clarity and beauty of his compositions. These are things that Bunuel was never cared much about. So when Figueroa and him didn't get along, Figueroa went to the producer and said, why are you hiring me for this? You could have hired a documentary filmmaker to film this. You don't need me. But eventually Figueroa discovered what was Bunuel's intentions, and they went on to make 2 or 3 more films together. Because Bunuel is filming this in a kind of documentary style. He's not intruding himself into the movie. He's not providing any easy answers. The film does not. It can break your heart for sure, but it's a film that you just basically shudder at. A film of an almost hellish nature where there is no exit. These kids really have no exit, and we get there's actually another surrealist dream sequence involving Jabo. These are the elements of surrealism, but you can actually see the whole film as surrealism. How can societies allow kids to grow up in such awful conditions? There is an out here. I don't know how serious Bunuel was with this. I've seen this film a few times before, where Pedro goes voluntarily to a sort of detention center. It's a farm, not a jail. He could leave. He eventually acclimates himself there because he's being well fed. He has to work, however, on this farm. And he has become trustworthy, but then Jabo interferes in all this trustworthiness, and this avenue closes for Pedro, and it's very, very tragic situation. And the other thing that what I found interesting about it, there's no priest here, there's no clergy, there's no church. We're talking about poverty. You would think churches and the clergy would be a big part of this community, and certainly Bunuel has priests and the church is involved in probably over half of his films, but maybe even more. But this is the pre Catholic Church description of the absence of the clergy before the clergy becomes a vital part. Whether that is somewhat of a observation by Bunuel that the church doesn't, involve itself in this. In Mexico City was at 1950 was a thriving metropolis. It was becoming a very modern city, a world-class city. Nobody in Mexico wanted to acknowledge that there was awful poverty alongside this economic boom. I don't know if it was a boom, but certainly economic progress was being made, and these kids have been left behind. And Bunuel is using professional actors here. This movie has a direct connection to Italian neorealism, and Bunuel had watched Vittorio De Sica's films from the late 40s and was much impressed by them. But he uses professional actors, and De Sica did not, which was one of the tenets, at least in the early days of neorealism. And there are some terrific actors here. One of them plays a blind man. Jabo leads these younger kids into such sadistic thievery. Even a blind man gets robbed. And this blind man is played by Miguel Infanta, I think his name is. And unbelievably enough, if you see this film and you've ever seen Fort Apache, the Cochise is played by this actor in Fort Apache. He plays a blind man here. And this is a character, again, he's unsentimentalized, even though he is being harassed and robbed by these kids. He turns out to be a rather sadistic person himself. He sings a song harkening back to the days of President Diaz, who was a very sort of fascistic kind of leader, who was followed by President Cardenas, who then implemented all kinds of land reform, very progressive. This is an aspect of the movie and of Bunuel's Mexican films in general that it's hard for audiences outside of Mexico, and perhaps even contemporary Mexican audiences, to understand some of what is being expressed here. And this really terrific book, Bunuel in Mexico, Crisis of National Cinema, goes into in great depth of what Los Olvidados would mean to Mexican audiences and why it infuriated many Mexican audiences. They didn't want to see such a horrible depiction, and that it even happens, and they choose to ignore it. And one of the sad parts of Los Olvidados is we can go to big cities all around the world today and still see the same situation. What should we do about it? Bunuel has no answers for us here. He's observing. He's informing us of what the kind of lives that people live on the back end of the capitalist world. And is liberalism, liberal progressive ideas, are they just Band-Aids that we put on as many liberal democracies in other countries try to eradicate, or at least try to help the situation of these people? But it seems to be a long-term situation that, in Bunuel's view, requires systemic change, and also systemic change in people, because Bunuel, although he was anti-clerical, he does believe in the concept of love and the concept of caring for other people. And why aren't we caring for these people, especially children? So the reception of the film, the reception of the film in Mexico was not good. It goes to France. Andre Bazin sees it at the Cannes Film Festival. Bunuel was very nervous that his film was going to be shown in Cannes because he had become famous 20 years before. Were they expecting some masterpiece on the order of Lodge d'Or? It didn't matter. Bazin thought it was a masterpiece, and he would become one of Bunuel's great champions during this Mexican period in Bunuel's career. In Mexico, they detested the film. It was almost unanimously panned by the critics. But then after this international reputation evolved, and the film played in the United States under the title The Young and the Damned, then it was re-released in Mexico a couple years later, and the Mexican critics, because of the international reputation, the renown it was giving to Mexican cinema, they changed their minds, and so it's since become considered one of Bunuel's greatest films. There is in Francis Aranda's critical biography of Bunuel, which is probably the one I would recommend more than any other of the books on Bunuel. He doesn't think it's a master. He thinks it's a bit overrated, that it becomes, the tragic situations become sort of monotonous. I don't agree with him. I think this is one of Bunuel's great films, but memoir alert coming. When I was not a child, but when I was a university student, there was hardly any film courses. There was only one that was available to me, and we would see a movie. Our class would see a movie, and then we would talk about it for 30, 40 minutes after the movie. My midterm essay, he gave us a list of possible films. Belle de Jour was on that list, so I did my midterm essay on Belle de Jour. So then for the final, he didn't tell us what movie we were gonna see. And it was the same situation. We watched the movie, and then instead of discussion, we'd write an essay. And I'm sure he thought nobody in his class would have ever seen Los Olvidados, and that was the film he chose. I had already seen it twice, and I was very much impressed by it, and I did get a good grade. So hopefully someday, Los Olvidados, like some of the other Mexican films that are so hard to see, and a couple of them impossible to see, will be restored with all the tens of thousands of movies streaming on streaming services. You'd think they would make room for one of Bunuel's most powerful, most meaningful films that he ever made. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who listened. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.